Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with my colleague, Will Yakowicz, a staff writer on the Vices beat. Will, how are you? Nice to see you.
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Diane.
Of course. Well, we are talking about New York and the exciting anticipation for casinos. What's happening there?
It's really the biggest story in gambling right now. New York has decided that it will license up to 3 Vegas-style casinos. So there's now a competitive bidding process, and the city's biggest real estate developers, the world's billionaires, and the world's biggest gambling companies are now all competing and getting ready to formally put forth bids in order to try to snag one of these licenses.
Who are some of the leading contenders, Will?
They are the biggest names in New York real estate and the biggest names in gambling, and then also, some of the world's richest people. One of the most recognizable names is Las Vegas Sands. They had sold their properties in Las Vegas a couple of years ago, and now they have casinos in Macau and Singapore, and they're trying to come back to the U.S. with a bang. And they have a proposal out to do a huge Vegas-style casino at the New York Coliseum in Long Island. And then Related Companies is teaming up with Wynn Resorts, and they want to do a big casino on the west side of Manhattan near the Javits Center, near Hudson Yards. And then, there's big New York names. Saks Fifth Avenue has put their hat in the ring. They want the top 3 floors of their, flagship department store to be like this ultra chic casino.
Well, it's interesting because when you think about the footprint that I often associate with casinos, you mentioned Long Island, it would seem that a dense urban center like Manhattan, for example, would not necessarily be optimal as a place to locate these casinos.
Right. And that's a really good point. So probably, one project I haven't mentioned is Caesars is teaming up with SL Green, which owns a property on Broadway, which is like right in the heart and center of Times Square. And they're also teaming up with Rock Nation, Jay-Z's company. So they literally want to bring a casino to Times Square. And that's a very contentious area, as you could imagine. And one of the biggest, a group of Broadway theater owners and directors has come out against the project. Interestingly, the Actors Guild has come out in favor of the project, but you can't build anything in New York without fierce opposition. Times Square is very specific, though, because it's the most congested area of the city. It's also like a huge tourist center, and people don't come to New York to gamble. It's not like Vegas or Macau, where if you're going there, that's what you're doing, unless you're on a business trip at one of the conventions, which is inside a casino.
Right.
So, the battle for New York is going to be really difficult. And there are 2 front runners. So in New York, there are multiple casinos upstate, which opened, years ago, full-fledged casinos, like one's in the Catskills, one's in Saratoga.
There are obviously already casinos in New York State, and in fact, not that far from New York City. So, what's the reaction there, and how's that impacting the odds here?
Yeah, so there are multiple full-fledged casinos, one's in the Catskills, one's in Saratoga, but they're, a couple hours away from New York City. There are 2 front runners, so to speak. There are what's called racinos. So there's a horse track at the Aqueduct, which is near JFK Airport. And then in Yonkers, there's Empire City. So Empire City is owned by MGM. That's a 90-acre property, right outside of the city limits. And that also has a horse racetrack. So Resorts World owns the one near JFK, and MGM owns the one in Yonkers. They are, industry insiders do believe that these 2 properties have, 2 of the licenses are theirs to lose. And, when you break down the logic, it does make a lot of sense. These casinos have been operating for years. They've been good stewards of a casino license. They've been generating, millions of tax revenue for the state. and a casino in Manhattan would crush their business. The Resorts World Casino at the Aqueduct is right off the A train, but it's still half an hour from Manhattan. So if you put a casino right in Manhattan, the bid is going to have some kind of hat tip, some kind of economic deal with these two racinos in order not to ruin their business.
That's not a term I've heard before, racino, obviously based on racing. One thing that intrigues me is in some ways why it took so long. I mean, why now? Why is New York City now suddenly opening up to this?
The simple answer is COVID. The pandemic, obviously hurt the city, like it hurt, cities all over the world. But budgetary reasons, it was kind of, this was always there were 3 licenses that the state did not give out the first round. And so there were always this idea of a casino in the downstate region, as, the politicians in Albany refer to New York. But it really was the need for more revenue during the pandemic. So, lockdowns and the recession induced by the pandemic really ushered in this new future that we're kind of seeing play out now. So it's, every time the state is kind of drumming up, a bucket to raise more revenue, they do look at industries like gambling. To be kind of like seen as an easy fix.
Well, and you have to spend money to make money. Obviously, I mean, any sense of the price tag that one will have to pay to get one of these licenses?
The price tag is absolutely ridiculous. So Manhattan, the prism you kind of have to be looking through to have these numbers make sense is a casino in Manhattan is the crown jewel of the gambling industry. The Resorts World Casino by the airport that I just mentioned, when it first opened, it was making $800 million a year in revenue. It's now down to like 600 million, but those numbers still make it one of the best performing casinos in the US. And it's not even a full-fledged casino. They're basically slot machines. So the price tag is $500 million for a license, at least. That's like the ground floor. People are saying it could go up more, due to the competitive bidding process. And then there's another $500 million minimum that the company has to commit for CapEx, to say their project is going to invest at least $500 million. And then there's a small fee of $1 million just to apply. So it's over $1 billion just to get in the door, and the competitive bidding process is likely to drive up the final price tag.
Can I ask, Will, as casinos have become more ubiquitous, I don't want, obviously, ubiquity, not quite the right term, but as they become more common and we've seen more access to online gambling, has that really had an impact on some of these destinations like Atlantic City and places where we used to have to go? It's becoming more common. What's been the impact generally on revenue per casino? Has it been going down, going up?
The regional casino expansion has been a big deal to the industry. A place like Las Vegas that is like a mature gambling market. So like, while the, Nevada as a state brought in over $14 billion last year in just gaming revenue, they have other revenue lines, right? So it's now a destination. It's now a place where you go see the world's most famous musicians play, and the world's, eat a meal by a famous chef. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what Vegas is. Like it started as gambling, and now it's, kind of family friendly, place to have fun for everybody. But Atlantic City, is, it's like the constantly struggling, that's the storyline for AC, and a casino in Manhattan is clearly going to hurt Atlantic City. And now New Jersey actually is doubling down on efforts. They would have to, change the law to allow a casino upstate. But there is now increased conversations between lawmakers and, gambling entrepreneurs and land developers about what New Jersey will do in order to protect its own gambling revenue if New York, when New York opens a casino in the downstate area. It's going to be really bad for Atlantic City.
So Will, I would be remiss if I didn't mention a name that I associate with casinos, not here certainly, but New York. Trump. Has he had any interest at all? Has he talked about this? I mean, obviously there are a lot of Trump, buildings in New York, the casinos over Atlantic City. I'm surprised his name's not in the mix.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, and I haven't reported that out, but he has not made any announcement. It would not surprise me, although his foray into casinos, in Atlantic City is not remembered as being a success. It was a failure. But that said, names are going to keep coming out, like the formal bidding process just started, and bids are not due for a month, a couple months right now. So we will be surprised. We will be seeing new names. And Steve Cohen, another New York billionaire who owns the Mets, he has a plan out. He wants to turn the parking lot where the old Mets stadium, Shea Stadium, was. It's now a parking lot. He wants to bring a casino there potentially. So, billionaires are gonna, it's really a battle between billionaires. So,
and one final point, when are we likely to actually see these casinos in operation, given where we are at this juncture?
It's going to be a couple of years. Yeah, it's not going to be this year.
Okay.
We just have to get through the bidding process first. And then, but that said, the racinos, that could be, and one of the arguments for the racinos to get two of the licenses is that they could be operating almost immediately. They just have to bring table games and real slot machines and take out what is called video lottery machines out. So, and then they could, kind of, while the table games are already there on the floor, they could, build a facility right next door and kind of remake it slowly. But yeah, that is one of the points. Like, New York needs revenue. There are two properties that just need different types of machines and table games.
Right. I will brush up on my Texas Hold'em and then continue the conversation as this progresses. Thanks, Will.
Sounds good. Thank you, Diane.